So it's my pleasure to just introduce Dominic Malentsha Sewela. A lot of you will know him as the Group CEO of Barloworld. But brief history, he grew up in Soshanguve. He never thought he would one day lead one of Africa's most iconic companies. Yet through determination, continuous learning, and a willingness to take on responsibility, he built a career that has taken him from washing engines at Barloworld into the Group CEO. So please do ask him those hard questions on how you start off at washing engines and becoming a Group CEO. He's a chemical engineer by training, and he's held various leadership positions. He rejoined Barloworld in 2007, became Group CEO in 2017. So he has been there for a very long time. And since being appointed, he has led Barloworld into a privately held South African business. But beyond the titles and achievements, Dominic is passionate and advocates for leadership, purpose, and legacy. And his story is not simply one of corporate success, but a vision, resilience, and the belief that leadership is less about where you begin and more about the impact you choose to make. So without further ado, I know you're here to speak to him and not me. Dominic Sewela.
Thank you very much for that intro. I guess, this morning, after listening to the session, I found it very powerful, and very insightful. Because if you work with engines and machines like I do, we don't get opportunities to come to these institutions. But I think it will be remiss of me not to acknowledge, that we're having this, discussion today, this leadership summit, at a moment in history where a couple of days ago we were commemorating, the 50th anniversary of June 16. I think when June 16 happened, I was about 11 years of age. I don't think I quite understood what it was about, so, and everything I'm going to be talking about, it is in retrospect. At 61 years of age, I can now look back and say, what are those actions that led me to where I am? I've got a vocabulary now to contextualize and say what those things are. So I think for me today is for you to realize that basically, I'm going to share my story with you. However, my story is my story. My experience is my experience. Then you need to contextualize it for yourself, where you're finding yourself. And therefore, it is important that, we do that. In the interest of time, I've decided that I'm not going to do slides. I'm going to get Michelle to share the slides with you and share the notes, because I think it will be more interesting to start engaging you with the questions that you have. But I will just highlight a few things in terms of, some of my history. Born in Pretoria, place called Valmanstal. In 1975, the apartheid government decides they need to move out of there because they're going to set up a South African Defense Force area, which it still is today. They move us to Soshanguve. Soshanguve, basically, it's a name standing for Sutu, Shangani, Ngudis, and Bendes. And in Mputa, there was a place called Mputa, so some of you may not remember it, some would. And they moved everybody out of that area who was not Tswana to Soshanguve. So this is where I grew up. Why is it important? I think it was in Soshanguve where, for the first time, I got to understand the concept of faith. Do you know what faith is? Yes. Substance of things unseen, but only hoped for. But it goes further, that faith without works is dead. But it is around 14 years of age that I become a born-again Christian. I get this concept. And it is at that point that I have this ambition of going to the United States to study. But, I don't know how, but I decide to come home, say to my family, henceforth, when I have food, I would like to eat it, have my dinner with knife and fork. And henceforth, you're going to talk to me in English. And so they laugh it off, exactly like you know. But I'm serious. So, because it was at the time that it became very important for me to say, I would have an ambition and I would live through it. And I'm able to tell this story in retrospect now. And I stopped playing soccer, start focusing on books. You know, I was not a good soccer player anyway. But, you know, then, and then I tell my friends this, you know, so nobody believes me. Up until I get a scholarship to go to Germany. And then now people all say, oh, this is really, I said, no, that's not it. I want to go to the States. Fast forward, I finished matric, got a scholarship to WITS. While at WITS, then I get a scholarship to go to the States. Study chemical engineering, you know, and after finishing, come back home, get the jobs. All my jobs in my career, if you look at my CV, were more on the technical side. How are you? Good, good. We have met. Okay, you look very familiar, you know. So, and I guess what actually happens at the time, I spent most of my time being a petroleum engineer, petrochemical engineer, and I decide, but you know, what I want is money, man. I want to get more money. I want to get paid more. Plain. I have this ambition, so I decide, you know what, the only place I can do it is not in this industry. I was working for Sasol at the time. I need to go to a industrial marketing environment so I can learn to sell industrial products. You know, 3 years under my belt of experience as an engineer. Eventually, Barloworld has an ad. I apply for this ad. They want trainee managers. Remember, you know, it's at the dawn of a new South Africa. It is around 93. And I take on this job. And I get employed at Barlow Park. Some of you may not know what Barlow Park is. You know, it's where now there's a development, you know, that we're doing on the housing side. And if you walk to Barlow Park, if you drove in, there's this rolling lawns, you know, dark ponds, very posh place at the time. Still was till I demolished it in a couple of years ago. And what actually happens is that I get interviewed there. I get the sense that I'm like, oh, wow, one day it'd be nice to be a senior person, even run this company. But little did I know at the time that Barloworld was number 79 in the Fortune 100. You know, by asset size, it employed 240,000. But all this was oblivious to me at the time. And I go to the place where I was assigned. It is out in Kempton Park, Isando. I report to work. The guy I'm reporting to, he asked me, who are you? It's disappointing when you come to work. The guy you're supposed to report to says, who are you? I says, tell them, says, what you going to do? You're coming to do here? I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And basically, you know, he says, he brings a huge manual to me. He says, read this manual. But remember, I'm an engineer. I mean, you know, so I then realized at that moment, oops, got to the wrong company. I think I must get out of here. You know, and guess where you want to go to? Back to where you started as an engineer. And then I get an interview with BP. You know, I take leave from Barloworld. I get to Cape Town. I don't like Cape Town, man. And I think on the day it was windy. And you know, if you're from Pretoria, it's warm and you know. And I couldn't really relate to Cape Town. And then I start asking impossible things. You know, as I'm being offered this job, I say to them, you know what? I want to have a BMW, you know, as a car, but they're offering me an Uno. I want X amount of money. They're okay with the money. But I said, I need 2 tickets to go to fly, you know, at least, you know, every other month to Joburg because I live, you know, in Joburg. So the guy looks at me like, no, we can meet these other things. But the tickets, the BMW, no. And I realized that, you know, what do I do? Then I get a call from Sasol. They say, hey, we understand you're talking to BP. If you want to get back to this industry, come back to us. Because you said you want marketing, and I realized that, nah, I need to go back to Barloworld. So I obviously go back to work. I realized the only way to actually get it going is for me to learn about products and services of the company. And the only way to do it, I must disguise, because at the time I was driving a BMW. That's why I wanted one in Cape Town. I have to hide my BMW, had to put on overalls, walk into a bay. There was a gentleman, who was washing engines. But I'd figured out that the only way to know it is to go in the back, in the workshops. So the easy thing to do is, as I say, Ntate, ke batla ho thusa ho tlhatswa di-engine. But what I wanted to do, though, it was the engine I was going to wash on that day. I was going to follow it. So I cleaned this engine. The gentleman is happy. The young man is cleaning the engines. And then from there, the engine goes to the next stage, strip the engine, extra labor. Everybody doesn't ask me who I am. Finish that whole process. Now I know the engine, transmission, turbochargers, and everything else. I'm a chemical engineer, so I didn't study, mech eng. So, but I finish all that. Eventually, I, do all these other things. I go to parts and every other areas. Then 6 months later, I go back to my station. It's the desk, guys. So I go to my desk. Fortunately, the general manager of that place got changed. A guy called Peter Baltimore walks in one day and says, "Hey, what do you do here?" I said, "Well, this is what I was hired for." And he says, "But yes, what do you want to do?" I said, "Basically, I want to start selling equipments to black folks. Because there's no chance for me to sell equipments to white companies, and there's no chance for me, to even sell to the mining companies at the time." So eventually he says, "Okay, give me a business plan." I didn't know anything about a business plan. And go home. At the time, there was a store called CNA. There was no Google at the time, and everything else. So I then concoct this business plan. I go to a guy who's an accountant, there. I says, "Can you help me do a pro forma statement?" And then he helps me do that. I'm telling you all the story to understand that eventually I get to start a division, but I'm man alone. I have to create a market because these black guys or these black customers don't exist. So I go to a company called Wilson Bailey Homes. WBHO, some of you would see it on the highway. And I convinced them to take one of their operators, make him an owner-operator. And because Barloworld is a big company, able to convince my manager, let's go to Standard Bank, put a financing package, but go to Caterpillar, sell these machines at a discount to make the business prospect for black contractors viable at the time. And eventually, all those parties agreed. To cut a long story short, I start the department. Subsequently, I hire a few guys to work under my wing, get promoted at Barloworld. I just realized, 3 years down the line, I got a statement that said my pension fund, when I turn 63, will be about 1.3 million. I'm like, no ways, man. I'm not going to hang around here for that long for 1.3 million, down the line. But I says, I've learned something, though. I think I'm going to start a company. And eventually, I do meet with these guys, who were in the petroleum sector. We start a black company called Exel Petroleum. I became the managing director of that company, go through the process, subsequently get involved with other enterprises, mainly buying companies and selling companies, and at the back of BEE, by the way, But remember, my kind of BEE, I don't have that last name, then people know. So I gotta create a case, Fast forward, I ended up owning a company called Agri, agricultural service company. It used to be a co-op, and I was the, deputy, managing director. It was listed at the time. I got a call from Barloworld. And they said, "Dominic, want to come back and help us?" That's 2007 now, as you had the introduction. And at that point, I then asked the gentleman who was calling me, the guy who promoted me at the time, to say, remember, I don't work for somebody. I work for myself now. He says, "No, we'll incorporate you into a BE deal that we're doing." I said, "Well, that's interesting. I thought the BE deal is closed." He said, "No, we'll open it up to make sure that you get accommodated." That was my return to Barloworld. I subsequently sold my shares at Avgri, and then and 20 years later, I'm here. But 3 years prior, share price of Barloworld crashes. It gets to about 57 Rand a share. And after you've done all this work, unbundled, streamlined the business, you get to a point, it's like, this market is not understanding this value. I see it. I see the value. I get, to take private, just basically the leverage buyout. So that's what I've done, So, and I guess I haven't started talking really about the impact about what happened in at Barloworld. But I'd like to leave it to questions because fundamentally, as you listen to the story, I don't think I started with a clear plan. I was really motivated by these ambitions. I was financially motivated. But after a while, once you make a certain threshold of money, I won't mention a number, it's no longer the drive. The drive becomes about impact. Is how you impact a lot of people, is understanding, what you're doing and you being deliberate about that impact. And therefore, that's where we find myself. I'm going to open up to questions.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Dominic. My name is Austin Malema from RTC Studios. I've always been interested in knowing when you were CEO to be able to build a consortium or work with a consortium that bought Barloworld. How did you get around the legal framework where you are the CEO and you are also part of the consortium that is buying the business?
Yeah. So, I guess, have you heard of the concept called management buyout? Leverage buyout. Okay, so I'm the manager. So remember, whenever you are in a position of influence and power, conflict exists. Okay? So how do you handle conflict? A lot of people talk about conflict of interest, but the only way you handle conflict, you declare it. All right? And let those people who are going to make decisions then decide on things that you'd want. So it was for me, I have sat in board meetings and I understand conflict of interest. That's the first thing that you do. And but remember, because I've been running a business, the biggest issue for me was how to unlock value, and whether you unlock value for shareholders by running a business, making sure that the fundamentals of the business would eventually translate to a growing total, return to shareholders, which is, share price appreciation and dividend payouts. We've done a lot of dividend payouts. If you look at, the trajectory over the 10 years that I was there, I think we've distributed almost close to 16 billion, Rand over the time frame. At the time, Barloworld was basically worth less than that, and it presented an opportunity. There was an existing shareholder. It was not a big consortium. It was myself and the Zahid family that already owned 20% of Barloworld. That was a no-brainer. But I guess the mechanics was declaring the interest, and the board could have decided to say, you know what, Dominic, maybe you should take leave, but it didn't make sense because I'm running the company. But there had to be very clear guidelines of saying, how do you make sure that as you run the company, you don't conflict yourself? But the good thing is a listed entity. Shareholders will make a decision. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi, Dominic. My name is Blessings Serokolo, and I flew down from Cape Town. Unfortunately, that's not a place that you don't like. Just to come and attend the Youth Leadership Summit. And I think the one thing that you and I have in common is the faith element. But the question I want to ask is, in the legacy that you want to leave in business, in your life, you speak of now the most important thing that you want to leave is impact. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I guess, social impact for me is around saying, how do you impact a larger majority of people in an environment where you control certain resources? One of the resources once time is a very important thing. So how do you spend your time, impacting? And the other one is just capital resource. And and the other one is, people. So at Barloworld, over the 20 years that I was there, I was very clear about the type of company I wanted to build. And I was very deliberate about it, and therefore I got there. The majority of the people were at the bottom rank. You get to Barloworld today is a very transformed business. That was deliberateness. And that was the first impact. Second issue for me is that when you have generational wealth, and a lot of people don't like to talk about wealth like it's a sin. If we're going to be transforming this country, we've got to have entrepreneurs that have got a very strong balance sheet and ability to create jobs, that they could impact people. I'm not in this game to drive another car or whatever. Those things are been there, done that. The issue is really to say, how can I create jobs? How can I go back to Soshanguve and make sure that, basic things like from early childhood education, how do you impact that element of the community that you give it? So for me, it's about giving back. So that's really the impact, because I think, Soshanguve, South Africa, has made me the person that I am. So for me, it will be, be able to give back. That's my impact.
Good morning, Mr. Sewela.
Yes,
My name is Dike. Quick question. To get to where you've gotten to, you can't do it alone. So how important has relationships been, both obviously personal and professional, in sort of getting you to where you are, obviously in relation to the deal, but also to the level that you've gotten to?
Yeah. It's a good point. I'm an introvert, by nature, so I'm kind of shy, and so early on in my career, I had to invest in networking. I used to attend a lot of conferences. I used to go out and introduce myself to people, and I guess in a company as well, you need sponsors. This gentleman that came to my desk was my sponsor. And then you need to build on that relationship. He's passed on now, but over those years, that's why he was able to give me a call 10 years after I left Barloworld. But I guess another issue is that when you look at the ability to create consortia, I spent a lot of doing creation of consortia before rejoining Barloworld. It is around finding people who've got different capabilities than you have. So I don't have that network of going out and approaching people, but I know how to design stuff, because I as a chemical engineer, is designing stuff. But I then got to learn how to structure things financially and business-wise. So then I started applying that, but I started to involve with myself who understood the sector, because when I got into agriculture, I didn't know anything about agriculture, and I had to learn, but I had to have people who surrounded me who understood that business, and I work with various consortium to do that. So I think networking for me is very important, building relationships with people. You don't have to be necessarily somebody else, be yourself. But make sure that people experience you authentically. That basically will get you far, in any environment and organization.
Good morning. My name is Simpio Mafuso. Mr. Dominic, my question to you, how would you advise your younger self with what you know now? How would you advise your younger self with all the things, the trial and errors that you've been through? How would you advise your younger self to see the change that you are seeing now?
Yeah, a very interesting question. You see, I have two boys, the age 31 and 27. I spend time advising them, because I think it will be a fallacy, to look back, and because that's why I told you it's easy for me now to stand back and give you the context. You'll see with the slides that will be distributed to you, and the narrative that is on the slides. For me, it's a very simple thing. Is keep being interested in learning other things. So, and if I stumbled upon it, I would say be more structured probably now. Be always curious, and be bold. Because oftentimes, nobody's going to give you permission to do stuff. You wake up and say, this is what you want, this is what I want to do. When I made that declaration about, going to the US, it's just a bold statement. You know, so I think what I'm trying to do, because my boys are now working with me in the business, and then I talk to them daily, you know, and they bring ideas to me. And really, the issue that I'm saying, focus on, understand the process, but be respectful to people. Because at the end of the day, if you don't treat the people that you work with very well, they're not going to teach you anything. You know, you're not going to learn from them. If you are Mr. Know-it-all, you know, nobody's going to work with you. So that's basically what I tell them. Because hypothetically, it could be me, because they are in many ways a replication and a representation of who I was. I started, you know, Exel Petroleum when I was about in 31.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Mr. Dominic. My name is Dudula. I'm the managing director for an organization called YD Collab. My question is, I've written it down to prepare for this masterclass, but what do you wish more young or emerging executives understood earlier about influence, credibility, and responsibility?
Yeah. I guess it's accountability. First thing for me is you got to be able to be accountable to self about your actions and whatever it is you do, as opposed to blaming, other people. And I guess one of the key issues that you have to also manage is your brand, okay? And managing a brand is a very difficult thing because, you know, you don't know at the time. So one way to do it is to have integrity, you know, and feel comfortable to tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient, you know? And that would mean you're gonna get into many conflicts, but be comfortable of having what I can name it, you know, crucial conversation with people, telling people what you feel like, how they made you feel like, what you don't like. But also when you give people feedback, be responsible that they will give you feedback and you take it and run with it. For me, it's basically some of those elements that, you know, in being authentic, you will then be able over time, you know, because now, you know, at my age, I can look back and says, have I been consistent? Have I been authentic, you know? And those are some of the issues.
Sorry. Good morning, Mr. Sewela. My name is Nolutando Mlambo. My question for you is on just audacity and triggers for audaciousness, I guess. In your career, like a working life is pretty normal. You wake up every day, you go to work. But in your career, you have these moments of like absolute audacity. So you go into agri when you don't know anything about agri. You buy a grain business, you stay in Russia, you buy part of the management buyout. These are all like little audacious moments. I'm keen to find out what those triggers look like to you when you knew that it was something for you to do something out of the ordinary, you know, to make something of yourself, more of yourself, I guess.
In the moment, I'll be lying to tell you that, you know, it's something that I could articulate. You know, it's a flash in the moment. You make a decision and you move. You know, I think the governor was talking about making decisions without all the information. And when you look at the take to private, I had to approach Caterpillar first. And I remember it was in a conference. And I said, you know what? I think I would like Caterpillar to support me on this. So I had made a move. So at that point, I could have been rejected, but there were other things that I had to then do to the point that the gentleman was raising about the board. So for me, those moments just occur. I mean, when I decided to go to the US, I don't think it was I was sitting in church, and this guy speaks with a lovely accent. It looks like very educated. I want to go to America. I don't trust my education. So those moments are not quite clear. And then, you know, the guys came to me with the idea of starting a oil company, but wanted to do a refinery. I said, no, don't do a refinery. I'll help you start a retail network. So, I mean, those moments are not quite organized. You can try and organize them in a presentation, but quite frankly, in real life, you have to have that ambition and hunger to say, I want to make a difference. I don't like my current state. I want to change it. And you got to keep working at it.
Good morning, everyone. Ratiba Mahale from Monarch Creative Agency. So my question is, most of the time when you look at executives like yourselves, you speak about 20 years that you have spent maybe in one company and all that. So what are the things that you had to sacrifice in your journey to be where you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as a person who is in business, generally we don't say it, we're very competitive as leaders because you compete, on the market, but you also compete with yourself, So you're saying a very important thing because I'll be lying to you when I was, 10 years into the organization, I felt, I think I've spent too long than I would have wanted to because my deal was 8 years and, I was able to now, cash in on the deal that Barloworld came on. And so at that moment, I was like, have I made enough money? Had I make enough money for me to create what I wanted to do? Because I've always wanted to create something. And at that point, I was like, no, probably not. But guess what? When I wanted to resign, they convinced me to stay. And then, now I own the company. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Dominic Sewela. My name is Hlengwa Mthethwa. I'm an attorney working at the intersection of law and technology, right? Yeah. I think I'd like to take you back to the moment you were driving into Barlow Park and then you were hit with the realization that, oops, wrong company, right? So I'd like to understand what you were grappling with at that moment, because I understand that you were working hard and you were putting a lot of effort to get that opportunity and then just realizing that, okay, might not have been that utmost opportunity that I was thinking it could be. Do you now sit and stay and persevere, or do you try to make changes, or you just get out? So what were you grappling with in that moment?
Yeah, I was grappling with the decisions that when I left Sasol, they wanted me to stay. They were trying to give me counter offers and trying to accommodate my needs. And I went to this company, which was going to give me management training and industrial marketing. So that's some of the issues I grappled with. But then when I was trying to retrace back, and when they called me back after my BP incident, I felt, you know what? I should make this work. I should make something out of this. I shouldn't quit. And that whole journey of going to the workshop was part of my coping mechanism, because I could have come to work and sat on that chair and maybe just be nice and talk about. They still would not have fired me, because at the time companies were really more thinking about quotas, having certain number of people in the organization, so they didn't care, because now you're a representation. It was not the scorecard as we know it today, but it was affirmative action. So for me, it had to shift. I have to say, how do I feel like? Do I get satisfied coming to work to do this? And that's why I started that path of saying, I have to do things I can control.
My name is Ngumeko Msane, and I'm a student at UJ. And so I have a question. I can realize that you were or still are quite an ambitious person. And I'm here seeking advice, especially on the balance of faith and ambition. I just want to find out from you, what are the caveats would you give to a person who's still young and ambitious and still chasing a dream that may seem quite unrealistic at the time, and also balancing that with someone who's also a faithful believer as well?
Yeah. I think it's important that you make sense of your beliefs, particularly of faith. Because a lot of people today, in particular, it's more confusing when you are a born-again Christian, particularly with things like ambition, wealth, and all those. But you still have to pay, 10th of your, But anyway, so I think you need to be very clear. But I think I told the story in a way that's very packaged. What I didn't talk about, there were a lot of challenges during the intervening period. I've had a lot of failures. There's some companies that I bought, I couldn't succeed. Some of them failed, even in the 10-year period. There are certain decisions that I made at Barloworld I regret that I shouldn't have made. So I think failure must not be something that deters you. It's got to be something that emboldens you to say, what have I learned from it? Can I do better? And so whatever ambition you have now, you got to be very clear, you go for it however big it is. But if it doesn't work out, change your mind, but keep going. never stop dreaming, never stop really, pursuing those things, but also invest some time in saying, can you learn? Can you enhance? I guess because you're a student at UJ, most of you are here doing MBAs, so I think it's important to, or some of you rather, and so whatever ventures that you guys have, keep going. But remember, failure makes you better, and as long as you learn from it.
Hi, Mr. Sewela. I'm Voisile Malinga. I'm the Group Legal Advisor at PG Group. Feels weird standing up so close.
Let me give you space.
And please clap if I'm too long, guys. That is well, in the same way that your great-grandfather called you Malentsha with the mandate of exploring, finding new money, I believe our generation is tasked with the same thing. The same way that gentleman said, we are the present, ours is to build. You've effectively done a very incredible transaction, which is a good legacy business for yourself and for your boys. And in the same vein, I think we are tasked at exploring those new markets, building those new businesses. I think my question is twofold. What are your thoughts on how we can effectively look and explore these new markets, given that the data is, murky at best, but we know we are the future, we know we have the youth dividend. And the second question is, what space is there for young people to collaborate with the likes of yourselves and these established families who've managed to do this incredible thing of capturing lightning in a bottle and create a big business? How do we turbocharge this growth? How do we accelerate? How do we make sure that when 2050 does arrive, we've actually transformed this landscape?
I mean, those are not easy, questions. And remember, my journey, shouldn't take you too long. You can do probably what I've done in lesser of a time frame. Not exactly what I've done, but whatever it is you want to do. So for me, I'll say, if you have an idea that serves a purpose in a market, you should pursue it. But if you have an idea, that you want to do business with a Barloworld, but understand that Barloworld wants to make money, you also want to make money, you want to serve. So be able to be very clear in your mind, your value proposition, but also be willing to take risk. Because if you don't take risk, nothing is going to become of your idea. So I think for me is, if you go back to that, opportunities are bound. And I say opportunities favors the prepared mind. There could be a lot of opportunities. You're going to meet a lot of people today, very powerful people. And it's how prepared are you? What kind of impact can you make that somebody, that you're going to be meeting in some of your session can remember you, and then be able to, when you call Mr. So-and-so, don't say, I want to have coffee. Be very specific. And then, because he will tell you quickly, no, I can't. Or, those are some of the opportunities it is how you capitalize on opportunity. And opportunities are bound. I'm not a tech guy. People are talking about AI, but there's a lot of opportunities that you can still fulfill.
Ladies first, you can go for it.
Good morning, Mr. Sewela.
Morning.
My name is Caesar. I'm a candidate at TAFE. I have two questions. The first one is, how do you measure whether your work is truly making a difference, and what keeps you going when progress is slow?
Yeah, I'm a very impatient person, so it's very frustrating, when things don't work my way. I do wake up, some days I feel down, because, if you look at the journey that I traveled at Barloworld over the last 3 years, it was the most toughest one because I was excluded. I didn't know what people were deciding, but I still had to keep going. And those moments, you got to start learning how to be self-coach. All right, I think you guys do have the moments. You wake up and you kind of tell yourself this positive messages every time you wake up, and then literally speak loud like you're crazy. So people say, why are you talking? Who are you talking to? You're talking to self, but louder, and you say, you know what, I'm going to make this happen. This is what I want to do. I'm down, but, so those are some of the issues for me that in the last 3 years, because, that's more impactful for me, it's been the toughest time where I had to talk to myself a lot. And I'm happy and fortunate that I have my kids, who were now my coach, who had to remind me how far I've come, and you need a coach, and whoever the coach may be, guys, invest in coaches. You can be however best you are, so do get a coach.
Mr. Sewela, thank you so much for sharing such an inspiring story. My name is Morgan, and my question for you is, what do you think set you apart from all the ambitious people that you've worked with? Do you think it was your drive, your ambition, your resolve, or was it the network that you built or the career sponsors that you've had?
Yeah. You guys are asking tough questions. It was luck. For me, it's just luck, because I'm not going to try and package the message, to you. And the more I went, I got luckier, and so now I can tell you about networking or whatever the case may be, but to be honest with you, it's luck. And I used to play golf. Getting player, the more you practice, the luckier you get on a course. And honestly, if you practice your craft, there are lawyers in here, there are engineers, or what, the more you practice your craft, you get luckier. Because the opportunities that have always been there, they now become more visible to you. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Stella Mapumulo. I'm from Barloworld Power. So I'm here to make a mark. So I wanted to ask, I heard you studied chemical engineering,
yeah,
and I did mechanical.
Yeah.
So in order for me to move up in terms of CEO and things like that, do I need to move from engineering to MBAs and things like that, or do I also need luck?
I'm giving you an appointment to come and see me at my office.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bonziana Marafe. I am a current student at BIT. My question for today is, what advice would you give to a person who is still navigating life but has ambitions to build something significant despite limited opportunities and resources?
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna sound like a stuck record, because I think in many ways I've answered that. It's very rare that you meet a black person who hasn't got struggles, who's got issues. So for me is remember, let that not be your limiter. And it's all in the mind. Remember that there's a concept where you talk about manifestation. It all starts with an idea in the mind, and then you gotta then believe it manifests. But you're gonna put some weight. Remember, the reason why I started talking about faith was that it's a substance of things unseen, but only hope for. So I think, particularly being a student, is something that you have to really focus on, because at the moment, the best way to get your opportunities is to excel in what you study, because having a better understanding of your craft will create opportunities for you.
Due to the controversy of my question, or potential controversy. But I will say I work for one of the big four banks, and I am in investment banking. Always, especially in immediate teams, leaders are not always intentional about impact, which is something that you mentioned. So my question is, how can that skill of leaders having their ears on the ground be honed and that muscle be exercised to make sure that even leaders within corporate organizations as they progress and move along their careers and in the natural operations don't leave young people behind.
Yeah, I guess for me, because my time is running out now, is just doing what I call management development.
The next one, that's fine.
If you're a leader, so that's where you get connection with people. Today, I do what I call CEO roadshows, but I've always been the guy who used to move around a lot, and that's how I got to understand what's going on in the organization, who are the people, and so today I do my CEO roadshows and I do town hall meetings, and that's what really makes sure that I get it right. I mean, I haven't been to power, so I'm coming. So, but anyway, that's basically what some of those issues. I wouldn't know, in the organization you work for how it worked, but it's harder with a big organization, which has got 240,000 people, and branches, so. For me, I think technology could be one of those issues, but also hearing. But it's difficult for us, the older we are, to hear young people, because we can't relate some of the stuff. I know it because I've got kids, So yeah, I mean, so for me, and they're not kids anymore, they're adults. But so it's difficult. But we force ourselves. But I think as young people do understand the context of the older people, but keep pushing.
I am Giorati Limoloto, founder and CEO of Scout Apex Ecosystem. It's a group that focuses on 4 business sectors. But my question is a bit more personal to you, sir. What do you think, and I say think purposely so, what do you think it will take for you to give that startup individual a chance, just like they came to your desk and be like, what are you doing? What do you think it will take for you to also walk up to somebody, randomly, strangely so, and say to them, what are you doing? And then later on, obviously, invest in them, in that essence.
I do that, almost every time. We've got a Barloworld Foundation that we've created. We've got Siakula Fund. We've got various other initiatives, that we do to support businesses. If you check the Barloworld website, the Barloworld Foundation website, you'll get a lot of those. And but I guess on the employment front, like I just granted to you an opportunity to come see me. You could have called, but now it's better. So it is those type of events that happens. That somebody may write a note to me directly. Remember, I don't read my LinkedIn, guys. So it's curated. So sometimes if you send me messages on LinkedIn, I might not read it. For real. Because you get inundated. But on an odd Sunday, I might go and check a message, and I find a very impactful message. I do go back to them. So I think that's the randomness. But because I've worked with Barloworld for 20 years, there are a lot of people are promoted within that environment and are back because of that randomness.
Good morning, sir. My name is Josephine, and I'm the CEO of the Learning Hub. So the man was talking about how you get into certain spaces, and you said it's by luck. I'd like to say it's by grace. And for me and my business, I've been graced enough to now enter into certain spaces with big companies such as like Investec and sponsoring me. But now I think the struggle for me is how do I maintain that relationship and leverage on that once you've entered the space. It's always about, oh, how do I get in, but how do you maintain, how do you work yourself into it?
I guess one of the key issues that you need to understand, I think once you get in, understand the purpose and the objective of that organization or that business that you're in. And if you can make sure that you align your interest to their growth prospects, and be able to serve what probably they don't have access to, it's something that, would actually ensure that you're able to multiply, where you are and leverage, the business that you're in. Because now when you're in, you've got to continuously differentiate yourself and make yourself more available for somebody to say, it's a good idea that I brought her in. But it's up to you to make sure that, do you understand the Investec's mission? Do you understand their business model? Do you understand the markets they're supposed to serve that or don't serve, so that you maybe can take a gap?
Good morning.
Morning. No, click it up.
Right. Good morning, sir.
My name is Rifen Deselepe. I'm a lecturer at TUT just next door to Shambufi. And I've got a lot of young students, who would really like an opportunity to be in the likes of the company. So I want to know from you, is there an opportunity for collaborations between Barloworld and the likes of my students within the Department of Operations Management? So basically it's project management, operations management, those young kids that you'd say that you want to make impact on. That's my question.
I think, we've done some work in such a way, but I have to be very careful that I don't, create too many things. I mean, send me an email. Michelle will give you my details, and let's see what exactly we can collaborate on.
My name is Katlego Nyakale from Marsh Risk. Question I'd like to ask is, I'm going to phrase it in Zulu, but translated in English as well. Uzikhuze kanjani in moments where you were feeling like you're successful? So how did you keep yourself humble and talk yourself down from being pig-headed or arrogant in moments where you feel like, I have made it?
Yeah. Those moments, occur to you probably in your private space. I don't know, I wouldn't say where. But when you're in that special place and you're on your own. But I guess, the thing is about, what you value. I said to you, I'm a very shy person, I'm private, so this is how, for me, I conduct, myself. And other people may say I'm big-headed. Other people may say I'm arrogant, because, when you're a shy person, you're not able to talk to people. It's not easy, so sometimes I then stand in the corner, you try and network a little bit. Yeah, I mean, but it's never perfect. But it must feel right for you, and you can walk away here and says, that dude was not humble, and it's how you experience me, but for me, the definition of success is how I define it. What's enough is how I define it. And because sometimes you can end up chasing stuff because you haven't defined for you what's enough.
Okay, my name is Lisha Nkosigala. So my question is around, you mentioned something about coaching, right? My question is around, what is the importance of mentors or mentorship in building like a leadership legacy? And would you say that a person should get both a mentor and a coach, or either or would work?
I think both, I would say. It's always great to have mentors in the company that you work in, because, they're likely to understand and navigate, the processes. But I think it's always best to get an external coach, because, in my mind, a coach is somebody who's going to push you. You need to come up with ideas. They're not going to tell you the answer. But a mentor is likely to almost share their successes and how they traverse certain challenges that you might have in the organization. But I think, so the distinct difference for me is the external party being a coach, probably the internal party being a mentor. But you could also be mentored by somebody external in the area of your interest.
No, I don't have a question, I have an ask. So, when this class is done, can myself and my brother get 30 seconds just for your time, because we're just starting a huge project regarding energy, and we're just like your advice.
30 seconds. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Dominic. My name is Ndugwani Robodi. I'm an MBA student here and also a CEO of Valuable Consulting. My question is, how do you balance your busy work schedule and also personal life and taking care of the family? Thank you.
Yeah, I say a lot of no's. I say no to a lot of things. particularly in my private time, in my private space. Because I mean, you're working all the time, when you run an organization, even when you travel or so there's a lot of things I decline. I mean, Lincoln, I love. I think Howard described is the right guy. He's been pursuing me for this thing for a while, and I kept on saying no because it was not opportune. But to be honest, Michelle, and then I asked a favor of him last year to come and talk at my mass conference. To be honest, and he made time, but at least we spoke then, I committed then, but most of the time I say no to things because then I use that time to spend with my boys, or the things I enjoy doing, and that's basically what I balance my work life. But most of the time, you spend a lot of time reading when you're in some of these positions, so and switching off mentally even when you're away is the challenge. But guys, it was great. You asked me tough questions. I don't think I'll be ever ready. I wish you the best of luck in whatever it is you're doing, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dominic.